We begin our coverage tonight with the startling indictment of 9 U.S. citizens who are now facing charges of planning and preparing for war on the United States government. All are alleged to be members of a Christian-oriented, Michigan-based militia that, in the words of the Justice Department, was conspiring to levy war against the United States and to oppose by force the authority of the government of the United States. Now, even though 9 militia members have been indicted, you will notice that there are only 8 mugshots in this image. That's because the 9th member of this militia who was indicted is believed to still be on the run tonight. He is the 21-year-old son of the self-styled leader of this group. Now, investigators say all of those indicted are members of something called the Hutaree Militia in southern Michigan. They were swept up over the weekend in a series of surprise raids conducted by the FBI. On Saturday night, FBI agents swarmed a rural wooded property in Adrian, Michigan. That's believed to be the home of the Hutaree Militia's leader, a man named David Stone. As that raid was happening, FBI agents in Ohio simultaneously raided 2 homes there and arrested a pair of Hutaree militia members. And law enforcement officials in Hammond, Indiana, were raiding yet another home, arresting 1 militia there. The Hutaree are apparently a known militia in Michigan. The FBI says they've been following this group for a long time now. What does the word Hutaree mean? Well, according to prosecutors, they say it means nothing. They think it's just a made-up word that these militia members ascribed to their group because they thought it sounded religious. They wanted to be thought of as Christian warriors. If you go to the Hutaree website, it's clear that this is a religion-based group. The group says it's preparing to fight the Antichrist. It's peppered with theological statements about rapture. And right underneath the picture of the militia members posing with their guns on the front page of their website is this quote: "Preparing for the end-time battles to keep the testimony of Jesus Christ alive." The Hutaree logo is inscribed with the letters CCR. According to their website, that CCR stands for Colonial Christian Republic. Can't help you with the colonial part of it. The website contains a bunch of military-style training videos. According to the wife of one of the men who's been arrested, the group would go out into the woods and train on survival skills about once a month. One of the videos they have posted shows the group setting fire to a United Nations flag, the symbol of what they apparently believe is a coming one-world government. Now, the Justice Department indictment says the Hutaree viewed local and state and federal law enforcement officials all as their enemy. They refer to all law enforcement officers as the Brotherhood. One of the men who was indicted today, Joshua John Clough, appears to be the author of a web post from earlier this month in which he warns, quote, "If you are currently a cop, you are the enforcement arm of the enemy. Don't try to kid yourself otherwise." It's this obsession with police that the Hutaree apparently hoped would help them make their big splash. The FBI alleges that Hutaree members discussed a number of possible scenarios in which they would kill a police officer in order to set off what they hoped would be a larger chain of violent events. According to the indictment, they discussed killing a member of law enforcement after a traffic stop. They discussed killing a member of law enforcement and his or her family at their home. They discussed ambushing a member of law enforcement in a rural area. They also allegedly discussed luring a member of law enforcement with a false 911 emergency call and then killing that officer when he or she arrived on the scene. Once they managed to kill a police officer, their alleged plan was to wait for the police officer's funeral. And then they would ambush the large number of other law enforcement officers who would be expected to attend that funeral. Investigators say the plan was to attack law enforcement vehicles during the funeral procession using homemade bombs. The militia would then retreat to designated rally points, which would be protected with tripwired IEDs, improvised explosive devices. According to the Justice Department, quote, "It's believed by the Hutaree that this engagement would then serve as a catalyst for a more widespread uprising against the government." That was apparently the goal here, sparking some kind of civil war to overthrow the U.S. government by force. Investigators say the Hutaree were planning to strike sometime very soon, sometime next month, sometime in April, Hutaree members were allegedly planning what's described as a covert reconnaissance exercise that they had been training for months now. They were reportedly planning to stake out a police gathering that was set for April. The U.S. attorney in Michigan saying that the group had decided that if some random member of the public, stumbled across the group during its reconnaissance exercise, that person could be killed. So they were arrested, presumably now, in order to avert that planned attack. The militia members who were arrested over the weekend, and the 9th, who remains a fugitive right now, were charged today on a total of 5 counts. 1 count of seditious conspiracy, 1 count of attempting to use weapons of mass destruction, 1 count of teaching and demonstrating the use of explosive materials, and 2 counts of carrying, using, and possessing a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. That first charge, seditious conspiracy, is one of the charges that landed the blind sheik, Abdelrahman, in jail for life back in 1995 after the first World Trade Center bombing. At the time, the New York Times described seditious conspiracy as a, quote, obscure 19th century law that makes it a crime to conspire to overthrow or put down or destroy by force the government of the United States. Interesting thing about seditious conspiracy, you don't actually have to be caught actively trying to wage war on the United States in order to be found guilty of seditious conspiracy. Planning it, conspiring, even if you don't do anything about it, is enough to be guilty of that. One of the other interesting charges here is teaching and demonstrating the use of explosive materials. 2 of the 9 defendants are facing that charge. Federal law makes it illegal to teach or demonstrate to any person the making or use of an explosive, a destructive device, or a weapon of mass destruction, knowing that such person intends to use the teaching in furtherance of an activity that constitutes a federal crime of violence. In this case, that federal crime of violence was this militia's alleged intent to wage war on the United States government. I also have to tell you, this has just broken right this second while I have been talking to you. We have just learned from the Associated Press that the FBI has apprehended the 9th member of this militia who, as of the start of me talking about this moments ago, was still on the run. Joining us now is Ed Brayton. Ed Brayton is the state editor for the Michigan Messenger. Are you noticing anything that is unique or different about this one? Obviously, the first thing that jumps out is the theology being so front and center with them.
Yeah, you know, when you look at these militia groups, they all have one thing in common, and that is that all across the nation, they all believe that there is an inevitable war coming, and a lot of them refer to this as a second civil war. A war with the government, and they all believe that we are inexorably leading toward that day day is imminent, that we're going to have that war. Now, there's a certain faction of these groups that also believes that that war is going to be a race war, and that's sort of the KKK Aryan Nation faction. Now, this group does not appear to be one of those. This group, in fact, sort of chased off one of those people from their message board. 2 of the men who've been arrested actually sort of chased him off, someone who came to their message board spewing anti-Semitic and racist rhetoric. They don't appear to be part of that group. But what is unique about them is the religious element to this, that they believe that this inevitable war is a war against the Antichrist, a war against Satan, and that it will be the cataclysmic event that will sort of hasten the return of Christ, after which, as you mentioned in your introduction, they will establish this colonial Christian republic. That's what makes this group sort of stand out from the rest of them. They're sort of the wingnuts, if you will.
I understand that the members of this militia sought the help of some other Michigan militia members during this raid. And as you say, I mean, Michigan has had a lot of militia activity. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols famously attended at least one Michigan militia event before the Oklahoma City bombing. There was a Michigan militia member who was arrested on machine gun charges. There was a shootout in which a Michigan State police officer lost his life not that long ago. What's been the reaction from the other militia groups in the state to these arrests and to that call from them for help?
Well, the local militia groups apparently do not like this group at all. Neither do the national ones, by the way. The local militia groups sort of don't want this group to play in any of their reindeer games. At least one of the members of the Hutaree was apparently kicked out of another militia group right in that area, the Southeastern Michigan Volunteer Militia, which is right in that same area, Adrian, Michigan, where they're from. And apparently, according to the spokesman for that group, a couple of the Hutaree members went to one of their people, one of their leaders in that group, and asked them to hide them. And they said no. They turned them down and sent them away. And in fact, there's also been some indication that one or two of these groups may have been helping the FBI track them down. Now, I don't know exactly what they've done, but there is at least some indication that they have been helping the FBI.